the annual value of the land for the benefit of the public, because the annual value of the land is already collected today, but it goes into these private pockets.
Bruno, you're an economist. We're talking about land value tax today, which is a hot topic since the 19th century, basically. You're an economist, studied in Switzerland, and you lived in the US, I guess, for some time, and worked there as a financial advisor, if I'm correct, about
public finance. Yes. Well, I studied in Switzerland, the University of Bern, economics and political science. Then I moved to the US and worked in Philadelphia at the Controller's Office, specially charged into improving the situation of Philadelphia as it was rather in a decline. And we worked on the taxes, shifting taxes around so that they're very less impeding on businesses, on people living in Philadelphia. So basically we tried to push for the land value taxation, but the office itself had no political or legislative power. Right? So we only could advise to the city council and the mayor and everyone what would be the best tax regime if you want to improve the situation in Philadelphia.
Like the UN, basically, no?
Yeah, well, the UN has a little more cash behind them.
Could you give a short, brief introduction into the land value tax? Where did it start? And I mean, there's, as far as I know, there's Henry George, there's John Stuart Mill, who was somehow involved as well. Just a brief overview, what has been done so far?
Well, the concept is basically very old. If you want to search where it academically started, was with the physiocrats. That was in the early 18th century or so. They recommended it to the king as well to, change the way he taxed people, to impose a single tax on land. It was called taxe unique. Then you find it with Adam Smith. You find it, the philosophy of sharing, or that the earth is our common heritage to mankind. That you find in all throughout the philosophy. You have Thomas Paine, Thomas Jefferson, they all talked about it. Then in the economics you would have Ricardo, who elaborated a bit more on the system of rent, or how rent is working or works out. But then, John Stuart Mill, all the old classical economists talked about it.
Mostly 19th century and early 20th century, I guess.
Yeah, in the 20th century, what happened is that the big landlords, the rubber barons, as they're called in the US, and I would say with the colonial power as well, they didn't want that. So they basically corrupted the whole science of economics. It was the Rockefellers who started, the University of Chicago. They did an endowment of $50 million back then, which, or it translates today like into $50 billion. That's how they started that school of economics in Chicago, which is one of the major schools, influencing all around the world. So this neoclassical concept that they introduced basically takes the land out. In the traditional economic sense, you have three factors. You have the land, obviously somewhere we have to be, and you have the people, and these two, so to speak, make capital. Capital is something that you created, or wealth is something you create. And so the neoclassical paradigm just takes land out. They say it's a perfect substitute. Which is not quite true. I mean, you can cut down a tree and make money of it, but you can't take money and put the tree back up.
Yeah, you can to a certain extent, but it takes time.
It's just not perfectly substitute. And you see it as well in our language, as we say, we talk about real estate. No, it's not. It's land and capital improvements.
Yeah. So there's a difference, a distinction between the land as such and anything that is built on it and anything that is invested, starting from cutting down trees, plowing it, to providing it with electrical grid and power
irrigation,
supply.
anything you would do to improve land, that is a capital improvement. Now, some of it you could argue, or I would go along with this, and you find it in the older philosophies. Say you irrigated somewhere something, after 20 or 30 years, that's kind of part of the landscape, right?
Exactly, yeah.
It's or you build a bridge somewhere, it changes the whole way society is moving around, and then it's kind of part of landscape.
So can we kind of agree that after 1 or 2 generations, basically the improvements become part of the landscape and it's part of the land? And if you have a bridge or if you have a water channel, if you have
in a certain way, yes.
If it doesn't need to be maintained, perhaps. No,
right. And you would also almost see it like, if you have a building or whatsoever, and the way the taxes these days allow you to depreciate, it's like over a 28-year period that basically your house on it in the end is worth 0
after one generation.
If you would not have maintained it, basically. But so just to understand that if you do an irrigation project or something really changing the landscape, that after a generation, that it's part of the landscape. You can't go back and say, oh, I dug this channel here, and
It's the same with copyrights on other things like film, or so it's like 80, 90 years and music and things like that. So it's after that time it basically becomes public property again, but not with land so far, it seems. But can we go back maybe to the feudal system? I mean, there was some sort of a property-based or land-based taxation, and to some degree it seemed to have worked, to some degree not. Can you maybe tell us what was the good part of the feudal system, land-based tax or land taxation, and what was not so good? Or when did it run out of control, basically?
Well, the feudal system, with the French Revolution, as it kind of ended, they abused, they sucked out everything of the people. Right? They were living in their big castles and having everything, and there was great poverty around among the people.
But would you say that, like in the Middle Ages, that in general, was there any point in history, in European history, that the feudal system of taxing land and lending the land also, I mean, it was not really owned by the people, it was owned by the crown, perhaps not even the king, but the crown as an institution. So it was in general public property, but it was, if you used the land, if you got the harvest from the land, you had to provide soldiers, I believe, and you had to provide, you had to maintain the land and organize
and
things.
To give 10% of your receipt or what you made out of it.
Which is comparatively less than today.
It's less than today. I'm not a historian really, and it's a little bit hard to argue this time. In essence, if whether you have a king or you have a government, doesn't matter that much. If he lets you be free and lets you be alone and doesn't take everything from you. If you need an army, the army adds to the value, right? If there are barbarians around, you need some protection. I'd say maybe in very simple early societies, it was more of a common good. And you had the commons outside of the village. But what we're talking here in the economic term, kind of want to make that clear, it's less of a question of agrarian or rural land. We're more talking about the land use in urban centers. Right, so that's where the real value is. downtown.
Today.
Yeah, it's not. People always like, when I talk about the concept of land value taxation, they're like, oh, what about the farmers? It's not the size of the land, it's the value.
So the tax would be, I believe it's the figures are between 3 to 6% of the sales value of the land would be taxed.
The rental value of land and the sales price of land, they're connected, right? And it's about, you could say, about 5%. The more of the annual rental value you capture, the lower the sales price will become, right? And in virtually it will go to zero. If you capture all rent, then the land, you could not sell, wouldn't have a sales price anymore.
So basically, if you would come to the sales value of the land with 20 years taxation, then basically at a certain point it doesn't make sense anymore to charge money for handing over the land in any case. No?
Yeah, you wouldn't pay extra. Right? You're paying the full value what it's worth.
So it's a bit maybe like if you're renting a flat and there is like a fridge in there and an oven, and you pay the former tenant some money to take over the fridge and the oven, kind of, no?
I'm just saying that the 5% of the sales price, because we much more use these days, the whole thing has turned into what is the sales price of land, right? It's much less of leases of land going on, and certainly not these leases we're here now in Africa. They're given out for like 99 years. They're not adjusted for the price inflation, so to speak, or the increase in value. So the guys who have the money today, the corporations who have the money today, they can come in and buy this at a very low cost, because 99 years from now, this will be very valuable land, or 50 years from now already.
So then maybe let's talk directly about the system that was somehow similar in Tanzania. We are here in Tanzania, so there was when the colonial times ended and Nyerere came into government, it was a more or less socialist government back then. They had made land public property to some degree. You could still hold on to the flat or house where you were living in, but you had to, the state would take over all the properties that were not immediately used for living, for instance. And the same, I think, was true for large farms. So you could still hold a small amount of land, or you could lease land for 99 years. But it seems to me that a major thing that went wrong, basically, that they did not really account for inflation in that sense, and they were not, as a socialist government, not accounting for a free market and the development of a market. So it was, we now have a more or less free market, similar to the West somehow, in Tanzania. So the land prices are going up, but the lease contracts are for 99 years.
Yeah, and it's totally unfair. I mean, the guys who got the land here in Dar, they're millionaires now. They have not done anything, right? It's just because the population grew, because it's getting developed. Industry is coming in now. There's the oil and gas industry coming in, and prices are just going through the roof. So you see a lot of houses being torn down. So the land in Tanzania, officially by the constitution, whatsoever, it is owned by the people, and the president is like the good
the trustee, or
the beneficial trustee or whatsoever. The problem being is that the land is not charged, or the landowners are not charged on an annual basis what the land is worth. So they're missing out on any value increases that happen due to population growth, due to development that happens in here, So the guys who got the land, they all turn into millionaires these days. They didn't do anything. It's just because the surrounding, and that's one thing, like John Stuart Mill pointed out. He said landlords grow rich in their sleep. They don't have to do anything. They can just come back to you next year and say, if you run a business, you have a bakery or a shop or whatsoever, they come around in a year or so and say, oh, your business is really going well, so I'll double the rent.
So apart from the problem that you can own land, the major issue is of course population growth and also inflation. So if you have a sound money system without inflation, like a gold-based or precious metal-based currency, I think that's less an issue as well, no? If the population stays in the same range.
No, but you have advancements in what you say in technology, or here it is. Well, one, you have the population coming in, but even if you would leave that you wouldn't have this urbanization of people leaving the countryside. Now you have oil and gold, oil and gas they find here, and so all these companies come in with tons of money, and rents just go up and up.
Yeah.
So it's different factors that play into it. Why the value of land is there.
And also you have the issue with land speculators in especially cities where land is scarce, that they hold onto their property without improving it, without constructing anything on it, and basically feeding this bubble with their empty plots
That's
of land.
absolutely right. If you put in a land value tax, you cannot hold a lot empty just for speculation purposes. Or you cannot have a building derelict sitting on it, because you're going to pay exactly the same amount, or you're going to owe and pay the same amount as your neighbor who uses the lot, right? And it's so you would turn over, you would give up your ownership or your land title, you would return it. I don't want to be responsible for that lot anymore, and so somebody else could make use of it, right? So all the vacant lots, all the derelict buildings, that would just vanish. If all the land, for example, I read something with New York City recently, I think, I forgot, it's like 20% of the land is vacant lots. They're not used. I'm not talking about having, I'm all full for a little...
And this time it's not about because of the terrorists who simply took down the buildings, no, it's because of speculators.
It's land speculators, yeah. So, and I want to say, I'm not against a garden lot, right? If somebody makes a little neighborhood garden out of it, it's fine. It's just trash, fenced in and trashed behind. You could not hold on to it. I mean, who would? It would be like paying for a parking spot in a parking house when you don't have a car in there. Yeah. You don't rent or you don't hold on to a parking spot, right? You don't hold on to opera tickets if you're not going to be there.
So if somebody would implement this, let's call it a reform now, not a revolution, land would still basically be private property, and you could still buy and sell land, but you would have less and less other taxes, and more land tax, so the land value tax would go up basically.
Basically,
is it a stage-wise process, or would you envision something that is basically done in one single stroke?
Well, if it would be according to me, I would do it quite rapidly. Get rid of all the other taxes, right? Taxes on labor, there's deadweight loss. Deadweight loss means the taxes causes economic inefficiencies. If you tax labor, labor becomes more expensive. What does that mean? That means that an entrepreneur at one point he says, "Oh, I can't afford you anymore, Klaus. I'll take a machine, right?" Or the next bigger step is, "I'll take my whole production. I'm going to China." So then we, the society, we're left with no jobs. We have to support the people who don't have jobs and whatsoever. So it's a big cost to us because our tax laws forced the entrepreneur, so to speak, out of the country. So get rid of these taxes, and then the collection of income taxes. You have the bureaucracy. You have an interference with your privacy. It's nobody's business how you make your money and where you spend your money and whatsoever. That would be all gone.
Interesting. Yeah, that ties into the 19th century, like John Stuart Mill, also his ideas about liberty and
It's
basically all these things that were already explored and very clear and logical and have been intruded on now again and again because of course, security, and the second thing is transparency, because there's so much money hidden from the state. No? But what would this be an issue with the land-based tax?
Well, that's not an issue. You cannot hide land. If it's Times Square, it's Times Square. If it's the Bahnhofstrasse, it's the Bahnhofstrasse. It is there. You cannot take it and move it. You can't hide it. It's the valley is right there in front of your eyes. And it's transparent because every plot along, Broadway, so to speak, within a block at least, has more or less the same value. Right? The corner plots have more value because you have access to the shops from two sides. So it's a bit more valuable to run a business from there than if you're in the middle of the block. But it's not drastic changes.
And this value would basically be determined by an open market and
by the open
bidders,
market. Yes, as it is, so to speak, determined today.
So basically, the government would not even have to run the bureaucracy to define the rate of the taxation. I mean, they have to define the rate of the taxation, but they don't need to evaluate the plot and the value of the plot in the sense, because that would be also left to the market as it is today with buying and selling. No?
The government could assist in valuing it and certainly monitor it, but as we have to take, I mean, these guys were talking about old days. There were no computers and all the things we have, GIS and whatsoever. So today you can just put that on the web,
and everybody sees how much the neighborhood costs, and also, I mean, in any case, most states, they would do part of the land surveying, I guess, and it would be part of the land surveying
since you
process.
have a cadastral map, since you have all these things, yes, it makes sense that it's government. There's certain things, and we forget that always, kind of thing. There's natural monopolies. There are things the government can do, so to speak, the cheapest, the most efficient way. If you privatize it cannot be done better or cheaper, because a private company, per definition, it's an enterprise. They need to make money. They want to make money. They have shareholders. The government doesn't have that. And I see government I see government more like the management of a five-star hotel.
And with privatization, we here, I think, mean that we're not speaking about privatizing public property to big corporations, but privatizing property to real individuals and small entrepreneurs who really take responsibility as well. No, I guess that's what you mean with privatizing.
No, well, I'm saying if the cadastral service or whatsoever and the valuation, that could be just part of a government service, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So there are mediators, kind of.
Yeah, it's like the electricity, or it can't be provided cheaper to the people than through government.
Well, that's another discussion. I disagree to a certain extent, but
okay.
But as for now, with the production of electricity as it is now, yes.
These companies want to make money, right? Their business is making money.
Yeah, not improving infrastructure.
It's not improving people's livelihood.
I mean, the problem is, of course, it's a very wide problem, but it's not really only the companies, but it's more like the shareholders and the management, which is in place for 4 years or 5 years. It's not owning the company anymore, no. And it's not responsibility for a failure anymore. So usually now, if you own a company, you're not responsible, and the management is usually employed, and it's not it has maybe a certain amount of shares, but it's more interested in the short rise of shares. So it's a boom and bust economy that we live in at the moment.
Yeah, let me go back quick to the privatization issue a little bit. In Switzerland, for example, we privatized the telecommunications. It was a national company. You had your telephone. Okay, I didn't agree with them with some of their services or whatsoever. But that was Cold War area mentality of, it wasn't a service, so to speak. It was more. They controlled everything. They controlled what kind of telephone you could have. You couldn't buy a telephone abroad and bring it home and plug it in. Nah.
Still the case in India, for instance. Yeah.
So that it's totally silly. Yeah. That's totally silly. Or they didn't do advances in things. It was more bureaucratic. But that's again, I'm talking about management of a 5-star hotel. A 5-star hotel cannot have a bureaucratic management. It has to be, thinking in advance and really search how you can improve the situation. So then they privatized the phone, split it off the postal services and privatized this part. Well, what did this company do to begin with? They sold their real estate assets they sold them left and right, which was of course very easy for them then to make extra money on the side and beat the competition. Right?
But that's again the problem, that the people who buy the telecom are not the ones who would really own it and who would give it to their children and grandchildren, in the sense that they would plan long-term on a long-term revenue. Otherwise they would have probably speculated on the land, I guess. So it's it's a multitude of issues, but let's maybe get back to the land. We have certainly issues with corporations, in the sense that people who run the economy are not really responsible, and they can't be put into jail or prison if they really screw up. Then we have the problem of the money creation, of course, that is enormous. But I think we have to focus on the land value tax and how we can improve things here. And a somehow similar topic is the famous basic salary that has been discussed to some degree now in Switzerland, in Austria, Germany, and some parts of the world. And it's also implemented already to a degree in Alaska and Norway, I believe. And there have been experiments with this. Is there anything similar with the land value tax? Have there been cities or states even, or regions where this has been implemented to some degree?
It has been implemented, and it has been, again, by the powers that were, so to speak, turned around a little bit. One example is Singapore, to start with. Singapore was financed by collecting the land rent. Right? So they had a port. The port, of course, brought things, so the merchants were not charged on the merchandise they were turning around, but on the location that they had. They still have a similar principle, would be like congestion charges you have, which now London has in town, or Taiwan had it as well for quite a long time, or relied more on it. Hong Kong relies on it. So it is in place. It's nowhere it's in place 100%, because people don't know about land value taxation. It's like they don't know about Nikola Tesla and free energy. That's not what you learn in school. I came across this theory by pure chance in the university. And I was actually shocked when I went back and started to read the old economists' books. I was shocked from the difference from that mathematical, abstract, neoclassical stuff that was taught me to what these guys fundamentally said on how an economy works. They looked at the economy like, in the same interest as a medical person would look at the body. How does that work?
It's a bit like if you talk in monetary politics about gold as a currency today. It's a barbaric relic, so to say, that is said quite often. And the same if you treat the human body in medicine as an organism instead of a machine. So I think there has been quite a good amount of brainwashing being done since 100 years in several fields.
To me, it's totally stunning, and I'm quite glad and happy that it comes, somehow, thanks to the internet, you have access. When I started to get to start to understand or research this stuff, I could find, I think, 2 books at the university library basically referring to this, right? But today, you Google land value taxation and you're going to get so much information. It's right out there for you to see. Going back to the question you had about this basic income.
Grundgehalt in German. Yeah.
Grundgehalt. Actually, in Switzerland, there's a referendum which will stand. It will come to the vote. And it's very interesting from the thing that they address what is a human being and what's the reason to be here. What are you going to do? What are you going to do when you don't have to work anymore? Right? That is the basic question everybody will have to ask himself. What's my interest? I don't have to work anymore. But the day still has 24 hours. So what are you going to do in these 24 hours? So you will have to find something to do, and you're going to do what you like to do. There's no more force for you to do so. Now, the thing is, the beauty in this system as well, where nobody has to work anymore, say there is a restaurant. Well, people still want to go to the restaurant, so they will pay decent salary to the waiter or the barman to be there.
Yeah, so the wages will naturally go up.
The wages of these people go up. The guy who cleans the toilet in the restaurant, he'll be rather well paid because there's not too many people who want to clean toilets, so it's supply and demand. Yeah. But people want clean toilets, so you're going to pay the guy, the janitors, and so on. They're going to make a decent living, earning all of a sudden. It will be interesting, but they will make enough that they have enough money to live. Say after a day or 2 days work, you have enough. It's not that you need the janitor job and a night guard job and 3 jobs like people have today just to make ends meet. No,
I mean
2 days. 2 days of work is enough to live.
And I mean today you have the problem that in many Western countries you have a high number of unemployed people, and then you have those people who have a job but they work 100% at least, and normally it's like 120, 140, 160% in a good position. So that would be leveled as well, because of course if you're really obsessed and passionate about something you would work more, but I mean there's less need to work for money in that sense, so you could I mean wages would be more flexible, and those things that are not people don't like to do would have higher salaries, and those things that people really like to do would have probably lower salaries to some degree.
Yeah, work again, and that's the interesting thing about this discussion on the basic minimum income. Work will be kind of looked at as a recreation. Either you like to do it, and you do it, and if you're an artist, you're working 24/7 anyway. And do your stuff, so you get better. Plus, it would allow people to do much more voluntarily work.
Exactly.
Like I see that, at the school where the kids are, the parents are constantly involved, doing things for the kids. You could do something in the neighborhood. You could come together. The neighborhood can come together and create a park somewhere or do things. So there would be much more voluntarily work in there.
So you get rid of the existential fear. I think that's the main.
You get rid of the existential
fear, which
fear.
sets free creativity then.
And also it needs, again, it needs much less involvement of the government. If people can take care of the neighborhood, then you don't need the government doing that job, right? So you get rid of that bureaucracy. And the people who now work for the government, they can actually stay at home with the kids, or take them up to the mountains and go for a hike, or teach them something, or go fishing with them. So yes, people will have to learn what makes them happy.
I mean, I've heard that, for instance, one thing that seems to be popular in some parts of the US is that you have pensioners who have had quite high positions in the economy or in their life, in their working life, and they want to do something, and they just go around the neighborhood and mow the lawn, and offer some very simple gardening services, which is a very, in our perception, in the European perception, a very low grade job. But in some parts of America, at least, it's they don't have this snobism about work. So people think they just want to have an experience as a waiter for some time, even if they were in a management position before, and they just do this job for a couple of weeks, because they still can live on their basic salary or on their income from the land-based tax, and can afford to go through weird experiences without having to worry about their CV and how it looks on their CV, basically. There's less existential fear, I believe. That's the main topic, so people would be more free in their thinking and physical movement also.
The potential, or what that this will allow the development of society is almost beyond imagination. If we are not forced to slave as we slave now from cradle to grave, basically. No, once people can become who they truly are, or try to figure out who they want to be, this is going to be such a creative potential. It's almost not imaginable, but yes, people start to imagine it more and more.
It's a bit like the industrial revolution in technology. You could have a similar thing in the field of consciousness or spirituality or creativity, in a sense, which is now lacking behind the focus on industrialism. But then another thing that a valid question, I believe, if you compare the land value tax somehow with the basic salary, and I think there are some similarities in the approach, then there is a main concern about the basic salary that has always been stated is, if you introduce this in one place, let's say in Switzerland, you would have an immense pressure from people coming outside who want to also have a free lunch and want to participate in this. And so if you don't implement either a very close border security, or you implement the basic salary almost worldwide, you will have a problem. So the question would be if the similar thing can be said about the land value tax. If you replace taxes with a land value tax and use this money for the community, as it is now in general with tax money, would you also have a problem with people coming from outside wanting to have a free lunch? Or is there something different?
It is different, because with the basic income, the basic problem they have there, and I've been trying to discuss it, but haven't had so much chances yet, or success, is how you're going to finance this thing, right? And that's one thing, the financing. And they always talk about sales taxes, the value-added taxes, and so, the more expensive things get, because you put the tax on in, the higher you have to get the minimum income. Well, if that's higher, then you need more. So it's like endless. And there is also, in that sense, a danger, yes, that the higher you go with that basic income, the more attractive it is, and you say that right, for outsiders to come in.
But they would not really add a value to the society in the first place, no? So they would
No, not really. And there now, look at this now with the land value tax. If you have an immigration happening, land becomes more scarce, hence the value goes up, right? So the principal beneficiaries of your basic income will be the landowners. And the land is always concentrated in a few hands. You can go throughout the world, you'll find like 4% of the population, if you break it down, owns 80% of the land. So the whole thing that happens with the basic income, and you have a valid point that you would have immigration coming, because it's attractive, right?
Because it's a better system than we have now, so it's very...
Well, no, what I mean is...
For the people, not for the super rich, maybe.
We have that problem I don't want to really say we have the problem. We have the problem in Switzerland already now. Simple. In Switzerland, an average salary is $4,000 maybe or something. Well, in Spain, you don't have jobs.
And it's still Switzerland has a much. It has not the ideal system, but it's much more fair than in the neighboring countries. At least that's the vote of the people.
I just want to say the $4,000 you make in Switzerland is very attractive. If you come from Poland or Yugoslavia somewhere, the average wage down there is $200 a month, right? So if I'm from these countries and I'm thinking I work the whole month to make $200, or I can go over there and cash in $4,000 a month. Let me go over there, clean some toilets for some time, and then come back home, build my house, and buy my Mercedes.
Or buy some land.
Or buy some land.
Until it's
yeah. Now, and another problem with the basic income is that they talk about, a fixed amount of money to be given to everyone. Well, it's good, that's non-exclusive, but this fixed amount, it doesn't play for me. It depends where you live. Do you live in the city? Do you live on the countryside? Do you, even within the city, which neighborhood you live in? It's not the same amount of money, and it's just like what we call Gießkannen system.
And then you would also need. I mean, if you don't make it fixed, but you hand out more money, let's say in Zurich, than you would be in handing out in Glarus or in somewhere in the countryside. Then you need again a big amount of bureaucracy to determine this. Thing, no?
So the land value tax, the beauty about this, again, the tax concept is it is absolutely locally doable. You can do that on a municipal level. A city or a village even can do that. It will have a great advantage over the surrounding cities and villages or states.
So it will attract wealth, but it will not attract people who could basically buy out the locals, no? That's the point.
Yeah, you cannot buy out the locals, really, no. And, okay, you could, say a city does it, or the state of Bern, where I've been proposing this with these guys for, I don't know how long, too long. And they hide behind all the data. When I ask them, so how much is the land worth in the state of Bern, I don't get an answer. Oh, this is top secret. Anyway. So if the state of Bern would do it, of course, you raise the revenue through the land values, you lower or you get rid of the taxes on income and businesses. Well, you see all the businesses coming in, right? All of a sudden it will be very attractive to build a factory or do whatever in the state of Bern because you're not going to be taxed anymore. Right? And you can tell the Americans and the Germans and even the Swiss around you, you can say, there's no tax evasion. When you talk about tax evasion, that's your problem. We don't have taxes here. There's no taxes. So you don't blame us for tax evasion. If people want to come here, this is a free place, free country. Yeah. They can come here. We're not hindering anyone.
The famous saying that where there is water, there's also has to be a desert somewhere, no? The desert is.
But they can change. They can change to this, economic efficient, social just system of collecting the annual value of the land for the benefit of the public. And that's another important thing to say. It's collect the annual value of the land for the benefit of the public, because the annual value of the land is already collected today, but it goes into these private pockets. And when I say private, those feudal lords, they were quite smart.
Yeah. So
before it was the king, and he was the bad guy, and you knew that's the king and it's the bad guy, and you chopped off his head and thought things get better. The system was still the same, but you knew who it was. Today you have no clue who owns these properties. You go on Broadway, who owns this thing? It's corporations, that are
hidden behind layers and layers.
Hidden, but So you don't know who owns it. It's not like there is the king sticking out his neck. No, so it's totally.
There was the saying that like you don't sleep well with a crown on your head, but today you don't wear a crown. You wear basically a black or grey suit like everybody else, and I think you sleep in general a little bit better, except you go to the Bilderberg meeting maybe.
Yeah, you go to the Bilderberg meeting.
But.
No. So that's it's very important with the land value tax that can be done locally. When in the state of Bern, if I would introduce that, or try to introduce it, basically what I would do is give the municipalities the chance to shift their taxes and raise more revenue from land values. We have in the state of Bern limits property taxes to 1.5 per mil. Right? That's nothing. That's on $1,000. It's $1.50. You can tax that property, and so $1 million property would pay 1,500. So it's totally ridiculous, and that's by law. It's limited to that amount, and I would allow them to raise that. I would suggest that they lower their income taxes. In Switzerland, we pay a lot of income taxes to the municipality. It's a bit different from what the US does. They have property taxes for the municipality and the school district. We don't tax real estate that much. We tax the people and fund the local government and state government is basically through income taxes. But it doesn't matter that much, the taxation is bad per se.
You can say even that humans are genetically almost a tax evading species. No? I mean, nobody really wants to be taxed, and also there's the argument that if you're willing to pay taxes, you only want to pay to a more or less just and efficient system. No? I mean, everybody agrees to spend money on public issues, but if it's it should be transparent.
And again, with the land value taxation, it would if it doesn't do good what the government does, or as I tried to say before, the management of this 5-star hotel, if it doesn't improve the value, the quality of the place, they can't charge more.
Yeah.
See, they have to spend the money wisely. And there is only that much money you can basically spend on the basic things of a place. But with land value taxation, you're going to collect so much more money than you can spend. So here I come in, I say at the end of the year, you get a citizen's dividend. Kind of your shareholder value for being part of this community, this town, this village, this state. Thank you, Klaus, you've been here, you contributed with your, you were making beautiful paintings, or you were waiting tables, or because you contribute. So you get money back again, and that would allow you to even do more of the things you want to be.
So that's where the Grundgehalt or basic salary comes in.
But that is then, it's fluctual, right?
Yeah.
It's a dividend. It's not like it's that much, and then every few years we'll have to adjust for something. No, it's how much we have, excess revenue. Yeah. So I can redistribute that. And that again also is with the influx where you mentioned before of people coming in trying to get a free ride. I don't think they would really come for the money, so to speak, because if they come in, prices for the land go up as demand goes up, and the dividend would sink. One more head, so the dividend is low, so it kind of balances it out. I would just see that they might come because it's just a better place to be, to live.
It's less bureaucratic, it's easier. I think the opportunities are bigger, and I mean, if you run a business and you spend almost every Saturday doing your taxes and your VAT bills and so on, I think it's also an issue, no? Because you save a lot of time.
That's another thing with the administrative costs. It's not only on the side of the state to do all this.
No, it's the private
the private sector who has to write down every bill and then be responsible for it. The person you spend, if you have to fill out your tax forms, you spend half a day. or a day, or you send it to someone that costs you again, $200, $300 or $500 to somebody fills out these forms. Well, that's $500 you have to go to work.
Yeah, that's a lot of trees cut it down because of the paperwork you have to do.
That's a lot of trees cut down. That's a lot of postal service that needs to be transported. It's just no, we don't need that.
Energy, in a sense.
With a land value tax, it's on the computer screen. Max, you would have to send out, or you could send out a nice postcard and say, all right, the lease is up, or pay your next, or Adam Smith also pointed out the tax should be convenient for you to pay, or the moment when you pay it should be convenient. So if I'm talking about agricultural land, I wouldn't ask the guy to pay me
in spring.
No, I would wait till fall is here, right? We would agree in spring on how much he's going to pay me. If he's a farmer, he knows how much he can make out of the potatoes or whatsoever. So but when it's done, when he's sold his stuff, basically then he can pay me.
So speaking of the farmer who knows how much his land is worth, basically, because he knows what he can harvest from it, let's go one step further in the process. What is if there's a farmer coming who believes that he can earn more from the land and is willing to pay a higher rent for the land? Let's stick to the farming example, maybe because it's a bit simpler, maybe than the rent for a property in a city. What would be the process? So you're getting a higher bid for basically this guy's willing to pay more rent. You can still, if you can still own land, you have to pay the high tax of 5%, but you still can own the land. You don't have to sell it, but there would be an incentive if somebody.
Let's look at it like from a holistic societal perspective. So you have a plot of land, and the best use, so to speak, is like we grow potatoes on it, right? So you have one guy but one guy can give to the community 5 bags of potatoes at the end of the year. The other guy offers, 10. So, we need to eat at the end of the year, right? So do we leave it with the guy who only can produce 5 bags of potatoes, or do we leave it with the guy who can produce 10?
But it's still private property, so he can decide, no? If he wants to sell it or not. He has to pay the higher rent.
The damage for him not producing as much as actually could be produced, it's damaging society. Right?
So if the guy who wants to buy this land basically says to the community that he would pay triple the rent, then that would mean that if this guy is willing to pay triple the rent, then this would mean that basically the old owner now has to pay triple the rent or sell the land to the new guy. Is that correct?
Almost. There wouldn't be a selling of the land anymore.
At a certain point, but in the beginning there's still, we don't want to look like communists, no? So we don't want to look like communists, no? So there's still some private property in the first phase of. That's a crucial issue.
Define private property. Land, sites cannot be private property. Nobody has made them. Nobody has created them. The value of land on sites is totally given by the natural situation, by what's going on in the community, what's the infrastructure, what's the services you have around. That defines what the plot is worth.
Okay, but legally today you have, you can, legally you own your land today. You don't own it because you have the loan at the bank, and if you can't pay the loan, you're forced to sell the land, or if the taxes go up, you are forced to sell the land. So in that sense, you don't really own anything today, but on legally it's still in the minds of the people that you legally own your property and even the land that you own. So that's the issue here, I think, and it's a bit of a legal issue because naturally you don't own anything, even today.
They can take everything away, go to Cyprus.
Yeah. What regulations have to change?
the changes have to be quite drastic somewhat. And I think people slowly wake up to the point where they realize something is terribly wrong here.
They also woke up to this idea before the French Revolution and before the Russian Revolution, and then there came some people who changed things drastically, but in the end there was I don't know how many millions dead. So there's some problems with...
Nicholas Tolstoy.
But he was not in charge, he had some funny ideas.
No, but he was talking about the land value tax, but of course the rich and powerful, the ruling class, didn't want that. Much better to put in a scum like Lenin, who kills off like I don't know how many people in its way with the Bolsheviks and taking over, than having a system of land value taxation. The Tsar, I think, would even have changed towards that way if he knew about it, and he could have avoided it. Tsar wasn't a bad guy per se, it just happened he was the Tsar, but he could have turned this system in a good, beneficial way of all the people. But the capitalists, the feudal class in Europe and in America, they had no interest of this taking place over there. So it was much better to have the communist revolution over there. It was much better to talk about Marx and how wonderful, whatever. Marx was paid by the Rockefellers, right? So Mao was paid by the Rockefellers. They want these bad guys because it's much easier to control the resources of a nation when you have a brutal regime in place.
Of course, if
you have a free democratic society, you're not gonna have, you will not have a chance to impose your things.
You can't extract the natural resources.
And you see this now again all over with these Arab revolutions and things. We just replace, we make sure, the West, the rulers, the Bilderbergers, so to speak, make sure we get the guy out and throw in some radical, narrow-minded people, right? And in the process of it, we destroy everything in that land, in that country, and we eliminate all the moderate people. Will just destroy these.
I mean, that's the issue that I personally have with the radical solution, because it tends to, it's a psychological issue that makes it somehow easy for the old powers, who of course see new trends very clearly quite often, and they usually, what they do is they twist these trends. They did this with Lenin in Russia. I mean, there were much more moderate forces than Lenin, and probably they would have brought some kind of good reforms, but it totally ran out of control with Lenin. And this happened in several countries. It also happened with the French Revolution, which started off with some pretty good ideas, but then was basically twisted and turned in a way by the old powers that were and be to turn out as a monstrosity and implement the old system again in a new disguise, basically. So that's the real challenge with every revolution, and I think to some degree it was mastered by people like Gandhi in India, for instance. I mean, his reforms are long gone, I believe now, but at least for one generation it worked, and it also worked probably for one generation in Tanzania with Nyerere.
If you take that French Revolution, the powers who were in controlling everything, the feudal lords and the church, right? They saw themselves confronted with this idea of land value taxation, because again, the philosophy was out there with Adam Smith, Thomas Jefferson, Thomas Paine. All these guys talked the same thing. So they took over the French Revolution, so to speak, and a few heads got chopped. But at the end of the day, the land was left. Who was controlling the land? The church and the same feudal lords. Then include the banksters, the Rothschilds and so on, the monetary system, the guys with the money. So they had everything.
And probably fewer of the feudal lords would own more, no? Because their neighborhood was kind of, they just left the country for a while, and
Yeah, and it's not that these guys, that the world is ruled by what, 300 families or something. It's not that they're all honky-dory and happy and whatsoever with each other. They have their infights themselves. You know, I want the bigger. I want more control. And it's a funny thing to think, like with, like the Queen, or was in a Spanish king once who said, "In my land or my country, son never settles." Well, with a land value tax, and dude, that's fine, but costs you a shitload of money, right? So they would be finished. That dynasty and that controlling the world and controlling all resources. Game over. You want to control? You compensate. So.
Yeah. I mean, my point is only that if you radicalize things and change things quickly, then basically you create a lot of volatility also, and you create you have less time, or you leave less time for people to wrap their minds around it, or the new thing, and to educate themselves and learn about the new system. So I think that's a bit of a critical thing, because speeding up and a revolution or a change always in the end works in the favor of those who control the media, who control the information, and who have the leverage and the power to buy politicians and to buy opinion makers and twist things quickly. You know, if you have a longer process, I think you have a wider base of people. You still need to do things, and you have to make cuts at a certain point, but you need, I believe, a very wide base of people who exactly know where they stand. And in the American Revolution, I think there was something like that. People talk about 3% or so of the population who were really aware what was going on, and it was much easier, I believe, to figure out what is going on, because there was one English king, King George, I think it was it, second. So the fronts were relatively clear, and these 3% of the population were had an opinion. They had the knowledge to change things, and were not easily taken over by false promises. But today it's a bit more murky. It was made and constructed much more complicated. Not necessarily more complex, but complicated. People who.
Yeah, but you mentioned certainty, and if you come out and you tell the people we're going land tax, right? We're stopping you being taxed. You tell the businesses we're stopping. So no more changing tax laws every year, and you have no certainty today, right? Everything changed. No, this is where we're heading. That's what we're gonna do, and so people can adjust to it already. And for the vast majority of people and businesses, nothing changes much, except they don't get punished anymore for doing business and providing services or work. You don't get punished anymore. That's the main thing. And you have more money, take-home money, which you then can decide what you want to invest into, right? Mm-hmm. So I see it very, very clearly. And if you would do it, if you do that change slower, and in the States there are municipalities who have tried or did, move things around. But if you do it slower, you also risk again the corruption of the system.
And you don't. The negative side is, of course, you don't really see the effects, no?
The positive effects,
because they are clouded by the still implemented old system,
right,
the still in place old system.
So I would definitely recommend to do it fast, and have some back ideas or how you could soften it if there is a case of a hardship whatsoever, and you wanna make it easier. But if I think these days we have a whole department for economic stimulus sort of affairs or whatsoever. Well, these guys can kind of still work on doing it, but now it will be efficient, right? Now they just spent money on ridiculous projects and support industries that shouldn't be supported anymore.
Let's get a little bit into the details here. One major concern is, of course, if you improve land. I mean, before we said that if you make any improvements after 1-2 generations, it's basically became part of the land, and you can't really charge for, let's say, a building that can only be torn down on the land. No? But one major point is still if you sell land or if you rent land, how to distinguish between the land value and the value of the improvements. If you have like a very small plot, but you invested into a 3-5 story building and put a lot of money into the building, then the land or the place is of course worth much more. But you don't want to tax the building because that would be the effort of the investor who also pays the rent. No? So how would be the process to distinguish between the value of the land and the value of this specific building or improvement, especially in an area where there are lots of improvements? So, I mean, if you have an empty plot next to it, then you have the value of the empty plot and can say, yeah, the plot with the building would be the same price without the building. But if you have a heavy congested city, you basically have only buildings on the land, and then it seems to become difficult to evaluate the land value per se.
No, I mean, it's not difficult to assess the value of the location of the land. That is much easier than to assess the value of the building. Because if you want to value a building, you have to go inside, you have to look at the heating, you have to look at all the, you have to consider everything of that building. So that's much harder. Or similarly said, if you go in a parking lot, it's much easier to say how much the space is than to say how much each car on it is worth. Right? Because you need to know the age, you need to know, has new tires, has a new battery or not, or whatsoever. So you need to know all that stuff. With the land value tax, you don't need to know it. Another thing which you said, and I want to correct that a little bit again so you might better understand it. If you build your 5-story building on a plot, you have not changed the value of that plot. The value of that plot is still the same, or it changes marginally. Marginally it changes. What you have done is you have changed the values around on all the plots around you. But your plot, you have not really changed. It's not because you put the building up, your plot is now 5 times more worth or something. No, the plot is basically the same. So you have an influence on all the surrounding values. That's how you define the value of a plot. And then, don't make it too complicated. We have all these professionals out there. So we have professional assessors, we have professional real estate people, we have professional money creators.
Already in place, basically.
They're all there.
Yeah.
So who deal with this? If you look for a place to live, you open the paper and says 3-bedroom apartment in this neighborhood costs $1,000, and the 3-bedroom apartment in this neighborhood costs $2,000. So it's already, it's not rocket science to assess the value of land.
The positive effect would also be that the neighborhood would welcome you building something, because it improves the value of their own place, while today it's rather the opposite way, that people are, in the first place they would oppose a new building and then after a while maybe agree.
The buildings would be of much higher quality and much better maintained. Right? Today you don't want to maintain your building so well, especially in the States where the real estate taxes are quite high and you get punished for maintaining your house. So the best thing you can do in the US is to keep the outside, the facade of the house as ugly as possible. Then inside you can do a palace, because the assessor doesn't come into the house really. So inside you can have, spend all money, but the outside make it look ugly. Don't put any flowers in the garden, have some weeds growing. Looks like a trashed house, so the assessor comes by, gives it low value. The neighbor who has a nice garden there, he gets punished. The neighbor who paints, there's a new paint job in his house, he gets punished. So the land value tax changes that again. You'll have an incentive to improve your house, your neighborhood. You have an incentive to do that because it's quality of life and you don't get punished for it.
What if you have an owner of a large plot of land who doesn't want to pay the rent but also doesn't find a buyer immediately, or maybe after some months or years he still doesn't find a buyer? And I think that applies especially to those who really own a lot of land. What would happen to these people? I mean, would they just have the only choice to return the land for free to the community? And it basically goes back into community ownership, as today is the case with like deserts, mountain ranges and things like that. Or would they get a minimum payment from the community for their land? Would the community buy back the land?
No. If you want title to the land, if nobody else wants that title, you can go in and be on the books with $1 a year.
Okay, so you can say I pay very little rent, and then you can wait if nobody else shows up.
If nobody else, says, hey, I can make better use of this, I'll pay more, then you can have it.
Okay.
If there's no demand for it, then the price is low, but then every plot is low.
And how fast can you have it? That's another issue. And I think that's probably also maybe there will be a difference between different types of land, agricultural or industrial or residential areas. That if a new bidder comes who is willing to pay a higher rent, what would be the process? There's the bidding process, and then you have a couple of months' time or a couple of years to
again, as you say, it depends a little bit on the use. It doesn't make sense like an agricultural land that in the middle of the summer or in the middle of the growing season you change. So let the growing season go by, and then the next round comes, and the old user, the old owner, he still can match what's offered, and the new guy who wants to come in says maybe, actually I don't have to have this plot, I can be over there. In urban situations, if it's commercially used things, buildings change hands already today. So if you're a tenant, you run a coffee shop or whatever in a building, and the owner changes, you're going to get a new lease, and you have 3 months. Either you agree or you're gone. And so anything which is commercially, I would do within 3 months.
And there's also this concept of the second highest bid you introduced to me. How would that work? I mean, that's basically because there is, of course, will be the fear of being outbid quickly. Today, if you don't want to sell, you don't need to sell, even at a very high price. If you have some emotions attached to the land, you don't need to sell today. But if the tax goes up significantly because somebody is coming there and wants to outbid you, that would change things, and you would maybe be forced to sell, or to let go of your land. So there's this principle of the second highest bidder, and maybe you can explain on that.
Well, that has more to do with the assessment. Finding the true value of a location, which you asked before, how could you separate the building from this? So you do, this concept was introduced by William Vickery, and he got actually the Nobel Prize for it. And he was a land taxer. He was very strong on the land taxation. That's why he thought about this proposal second.
When did he get the Nobel Prize?
1996.
Okay, so they give Nobel Prizes for people who are interested in land taxation.
Yeah, they didn't say that it was for that. They rather kept that rather quiet. And strangely enough, he had a heart attack before he actually could go and collect the prize. But anyway. So the second highest bid, how it works is you do a bidding on a lot, or you could do bidding on anything, but closed sealed bids. So you put your number you want, you put the value, what it's worth to you put on a piece of paper and you hand it in. The object goes to the person with the highest bid, but he pays only the second highest price. that way you encourage people to really say what it's worth to me without then punishing them for paying, more.
Yeah. Drive the price up like it happens today on eBay all the time, that you have you buy a used thing and you basically end up paying more than the new thing would cost on the free market, because you get into this bidding frenzy and you push prices up more than they would actually be on a market.
You get encouraged to really name your value, what it's worth to you, without being punished for declaring what it's worth to you, right? And today, like a lot of land transactions and the whole speculation boom bust cycle always goes, that people think, okay, I'll buy this plot, and I'll make money as the price goes, I'll make money, and people jump on it till it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
The last one who made the biggest miscalculation.
The second highest bid principle would basically take out a certain amount of emotional hype that is not really reflecting the true value of the land.
Yeah, and you can do it again for assessing things. There is a plot, there is buildings that come available, that come on the market all the time. That's a natural thing, and so you can do these bidding process, and you have a new starting point, pinpoint on your GIS map, so to speak, where you then can fan out, so to speak, the values. And the other thing also you mentioned, and people always bring that up, and it's important to discuss it. It's like, the sentimental attachment you might have to a place, and you wouldn't want to give it up or whatsoever. Fact is, as it is today, you inherit your parents' house, and here comes the state and says, oh, you inherited something, you owe. Well, you have to sell that piece. Right? You have to sell it in order to satisfy the tax demands from the government. So that's totally, ridiculous.
So there's a lot of illusions involved today, and emotional habits or patterns that are not really reflecting the true situation, because you believe you own land or property today, but you don't really own it, and in many cases you're forced to sell it.
You're always robbed of your property, and by property I mean tangible things you own. You're totally always getting robbed.
And we're talking about the lower and middle class here. We're not talking about the super rich. Even millionaires get robbed in times of the busts, like in the 1920s and 30s. A lot of quite rich or wealthy people got lost everything, but there's this small percentage of people who are triggering these busts, and they basically almost never lose in that system.
Now, system is set up for them.
It's not
to benefit them, and you just saw that now recently with like the gold price. That dropped like 20% in like 2 or 3 days. How is that possible without somebody rigging the market?
So it's not set up for kings, the system, it's set up for Caesars basically. And those are the ones who really profit in the long run. You can profit a bit if you're a corrupt politician, or if you can even profit to some degree if you're an entrepreneur and are very clever and try to trick the system for a while, but in the end it's you're betting against the super rich. Implementing this new system, I think practically there should be, as I see it, no real issues in implementing a land value tax system and getting rid of almost all of the old taxes. But the question would be, what kind of psychological issues would you see coming up, and how would you tackle them? Would you would you bring in a team of mediators, or how much public relations effort would you calculate into this transition phase?
Well, there's of course public relations issues. You have to explain it to the people. That's how the people need to want it. I always looked at this thing a little bit. This is a bottom-up, top-down revolution, right? It needs both. It needs the people on the street need to understand how it works and how it benefits them, and the guys who run the show, or the politicians and the bureaucrats, they need to bring it down. So you can't do it against each other. So that's also the nice thing. I always thought that is a common sense thing.
Yeah.
Now, how you teach people common sense, it's hard, but not so easy. But no, it's actually easy. Once people start to grasp the idea, once the media starts to grasp the idea, if I be governor, I would have seminars for the people in the municipalities. I will call these former tax administrators in to meetings and whatsoever, and explain them there how it works and assist them within the transition. And again, if I'd be running the state, I would be kind of outsourcing it to the towns. You can do that, right? It doesn't need me, a central government, telling you what you need to do. That's how you do it. That's what I recommend.
Like in the 19th century, when Henry George and these people wrote about land value tax, I believe still a good amount of money and wealth for the super rich was directly created from the land and from the production of the land. One could contest this concept for today's situation, where you have the super rich are basically, at least immediately on the paper, not landowners, but they're called also multinationals, because they're not like kings hold on to their land, but they move around, and if there's a tax haven somewhere else that is better, then they move to Monaco or to Singapore, and basically don't give a damn about where they live. And they make a lot of money in the paper market, in derivatives, in very abstract money transactions that are not immediately connected to even physical goods or services, but it's basically a big gamble. And a lot of money is made in these businesses, and not only by rich individuals, but also by the banks, who eventually created the money and own the money. And as long as the system is afloat as it is now, basically, most of the wealth seems not to be in the soil or in the land, but it seems to be in the paper markets. One could argue, until, of course, the paper markets crash and people again see that the real value is in different things then. So the question is, would still this 19th century concept of land as where the money is made, is this still valid in the 20th and 21st century?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that it seems like the money is made in that fraudulent, fictitious money banking system, right? But the fact is that with that money which they rob and create out of nothing, they actually buy the real assets. They buy industries, and there's a big land grab going on here in Africa. It's not only the Chinese that try to secure the food sources, but the Europeans are in here buying land. So the land is in that's what's left. I mean, if the bubble bursts and all the non-existing money that we believed exists is gone, then the thing which you still need to survive is land, right, and resources.
Yeah.
So
at the end of the boom and bust cycle, land is still the asset that has produced most and is still in the hand of those who run the show.
Land is the access to land is the basic of life. If you don't have access to land, you don't live.
Yeah.
I mean, then you.
So even if it appears in the last decades appears like that there is no value in land, on the long run it's still all based on the land.
It's still there, and you see in America, I know that like farmland, the prices have multiplied. Again, because the banks, the JP Morgans and so on, they just keep on buying these farms. Right? And then they know the scam even better. Then they go to Washington and tell them, oh, we need subsidies for the poor farmers, which then straight away goes in the pocket of the landowner. That's another thing really that a lot of people think about, oh, what about farmers? And I had that asked in Switzerland as well. In Switzerland, at least 50% of the farmers are tenant farmers. Right?
Yeah,
they don't own the land.
That's amazing.
They work there as, a little bit above slave level. All right? Anytime the landowner can say, hey, I'm not giving you you're not leasing my land anymore, I'm leasing it to the other guy because he pays me more. So there's no, it's, most people do not own the land they're working on. They're depending on the people who own it, and they can say what's going on. Mm. But really the wealth, it's an important issue that, when we did these bailouts and we gave them the money, they went to buy the industries, right? And you can just buy.
Of course, yeah.
You can buy Porsche, and you can buy Volkswagen, you can buy whatever. You can buy real value, real assets. And
so maybe to sum it up regarding the monetary system and the financial system, that is very different from real economics in a sense. It's basically a speculator bubble on top of the real economy. The question would also be: would money itself would not rather lose importance in a system where one major chunk of kind of laundering money, or almost to speak, would be taken away in a sense? So there's like one major underlying factor of speculation would be rooted out, so to speak. So the whole system of money would probably suffer in a positive way for the citizens, no?
Suffer in a positive way, that's right. With the land value tax system, money becomes much less important. Under land value taxation, you have public transport is included. You're not going to pay to take a bus. You're not going to pay to take a train. It's like you don't pay for an elevator. If you go in a building and you go in the elevator, you don't pay because it's included in the rent. Right?
It's important, because if you get rid of the bureaucracy to collect the tickets and all the automats that you need to have in space and so on, to pay a ticket for a bus or a train, that also makes the system more efficient and frees people. It frees resources and time.
Time is another issue there, because you need, you stop and then everybody has, in the States, it's horrible. Everybody has to go by the guy, drop the coin and so on. It's so slow. At least in Switzerland we have, we have this general tickets or whatever, and you're responsible. So the door opens, boom, you're going in.
It's
and
a bit more efficient.
But still, in subway system, you have to pay. You have all these tellers, then you have to have surveillance cameras to do. That's all gone.
So it makes no sense to pay for services that almost anybody uses. No?
You basically pay it double these days. You pay your landlord because he says, oh, you know what, this building here is 1 block from the bus stop, right? So you're paying me for having a bus stop over there, and then you're paying triple. You have already paid the bus stop through your taxes, right? And now you're going to pay even that you can use it. So it's totally nonsense. Land tax, the bus is free. It's included. If we need to move people around, we have it included. And also the health system.
So you would not pay for the hairdresser of poodles because not everybody has a poodle, and basically you have to pay for this really. But
that's your poodle. That's your healthcare.
Everybody uses it, so it averages out. It's not worth the bureaucracy, basically.
It's not worth the bureaucracy. If you break your leg, hey, I'm happy I can take you to the hospital, and there's the best doctors that can take care of you. I'm not charging, and there would change, and there would be a new great industry. I'm not charging the people who live here or the people of this nation. Now, if somebody else comes from the outside, then I'll tell him how much it costs and he can pay. It's like Bangkok has it these days. You go to Bangkok specially just to see doctors, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Because they have great
India as well,
doctors. So if we have, whether it's in Switzerland or the US, if we have the greatest doctors whatsoever, We're happy if somebody else comes as well, gives us a chance to improve our techniques and so forth. As a mayor, I would just immediately get rid of income taxes, because that would save me 20% of administrative costs, right?
And this,
of every dollar I cash in, I spend at least 20 cents to get that dollar with the administration. It would free the people. Cost of labor would come down. More labor would get hired by the commerce, by the entrepreneurs. You have an immediate effect. All right, now with this fraudulent banks, the system that's running here, and all this non-existent fake money, and they make more money, with that they can go and buy real assets. You have the land grab going on all around the world.
Yeah, so there's a change
so
of
they with all that money that doesn't really exist, they go out and buy land.
That really
right?
exists.
And the Chinese are buying land like crazy. It's the European companies buying land like crazy here in Africa, because that's what's going to be once the bust comes with all that, once that. When we bailed out the banks, we gave money that didn't really exist, right? This was paper losses. So we gave money that didn't exist. With that money, they could go over and buy the assets that are real. They bought the industries, they bought the assets. They went out and bought everything of real value. The other thing is that, again, you don't have to buy the land anymore, right? So you don't have to go to the bank and ask for money, for a credit, for a mortgage. But because now there's much less demand on mortgages, right? The banks will actually have to find businesses where they can lend money out, right? So the money that would be lent out would be actually going into the real economy and not into speculative, building up speculative bubbles.
That's a good point.